Okay, great. Angeline, can you see the screen share? Perfect. So hello to everyone, and thank you for being here for this kickoff call for strategic partnership grants for fiscal year 2023. We are recording the session. You probably just heard a little message about that from Zoom. And another note of housekeeping is that we will be sending you a copy of these slides, as well as a link to the recording after the session in case you'd like to share, review those materials later or share them with colleagues. Here's the list of strategic partnership grantees for this year. We have over 35 organizations participating in the grant program, and with so many people who are registered for today's call, we've chosen not to set aside time in our agenda for everyone to introduce themselves. However, we do want to acknowledge that relationships are really at the heart of what we do, and connections between our organizations are invaluable. This is a really impressive group and working on a lot of really impactful and exciting projects. So stay tuned for opportunities as the year goes on, opportunities to connect. Here's the agenda for our time together. The most important items for us to discuss are related to the contracts, which is the way that Buncombe County structures our grant awards. In that section of the agenda, we'll go into important information about how to access the grant funding. And we'll talk about reporting and monitoring and leave you with next steps to be ready to get going on your projects. And we have time built in for questions and answers. If you think of questions as we go along, just feel free to type them in the chat and we'll circle back. Buncombe County currently has 9 grant programs partnering with community organizations across various domains that line up with county goals and priorities. BuncombeCounty.org is the site where you can link to information about all of those various different grant programs, such as the information about the grant making committees, who has been awarded funds, the performance reporting for previous projects, and so forth. Strategic Partnership Grant funding, what we're here to talk about today, is granted to nonprofit organizations working toward outcomes in alignment with the county's strategic plan. All of the projects fit into the county's focus areas of education, environment, well-being, and economy. This is a snapshot of grants for the fiscal year 23. We name our grant years after the county's fiscal year, which is the financial year that runs from July through June. And we name the fiscal year for the year it ends in. So the 22-23 year is our FY23. So for this year, the total grant pool is $900,000, and that funding is awarded to 37 different projects across 36 different organizations in the community. And as you look at the list of projects, you get a taste for the real mix and variety that are represented. Adult education and youth education programs, environmental projects, basic needs of various types, violence prevention and response, food programs, health and wellness projects, homelessness, mental health, legal, pets, culture, financial well-being, small business, and more. So really just a wide range of work. We appreciate what you do, and we're glad to have you included in this grant program. So here we are approaching July 1st, that's this Friday. And this is an important date because it's the start of the new fiscal year, which is the start of the new grant period. Your funding is to support 12 months of the fiscal year, which I mentioned earlier, and staff are working diligently to equip you to be ready to get going on your grant projects. And the first step is for us to establish those contracts. So we'll move into that content now, and I will pass the microphone to Angela.
Thank you. So contracts are the way that Buncombe County provides funds to the grantees. We follow certain rules given to us by the elected County Board of Commissioners, like the resolution shown here on the screen. It says that we are to establish contracts that maintain certain elements, including financial assurances, insurance provisions, payment details, a scope of work, and reporting requirements. And we'll go over each of these items over the next few slides. So one of the elements of our contracts is nonprofit financial assurances. As described in the grant guidelines, we collect certain financial assurances from nonprofit organizations who receive grants. The required documentation includes the most recent IRS Form 990, as well as your financial statements. The required financial statements are tiered according to the size of your nonprofit. If for any reason your nonprofit is not able to provide the required assurance, please reach out to us and let us know. We can review your situation on a case-by-case basis to determine if you would qualify for a waiver to be able to substitute a different level of documentation. Insurance is also something that's pretty specific. We receive guidance from the county's risk management office about the level of insurance to request, depending on the nature of the work being conducted. When you review your draft contract, you'll see a section listing which insurance is requested for your project and the minimum amounts of coverage that's needed. If you don't feel like it's necessary to carry the amount of insurance that we're requesting, please let us know so that we can look into it with you. Here are some common types of insurance that you may see, with the first three, the ones that are shown in bold being the most common ones. These are fairly standard insurances for nonprofits to carry, and you may utilize your grant funds to maintain the coverage as long as it's built into your project budget. Once the contracts are fully executed, which means that it's signed by both parties, you'll be eligible for payments per the terms of the contract. Here's our standard payment schedule listed on the screen. It calls for invoices to be submitted quarterly for reimbursement. If you'd like to request a different payment structure, please let us know. For example, some of your projects may be seasonal and it just doesn't make sense to spread the payments out over the entire fiscal year. Or for example, some nonprofits may rely on cash flow in order to conduct the work. So reimbursement may not be what works in those cases. We'll start with this standard language and commit to being as flexible as possible in helping you meet your needs though. The scope of work in our contracts is the place where we document the agreements specific to your project. Nearly everything else is boilerplate and applies to everyone, but this is the section that's all about your work. Our goal is to communicate the project in a straightforward list of activities that your organization agrees to complete by taking on the funds. Thank you very much for your responsiveness when I reached out to you asking for help in developing these. You should have already received a draft of your contract. Anything in the contract is up for discussion if you have a question or want to request a change. However, this is the section where we do have the most flexibility. So you'll want to read the scope of work very closely and let us know if you'd like to request any changes. Also in every scope of work, there's a section for reporting. We'll provide you with a reporting workbook to be used for the quarterly reports. The reports have 3 sections, the budget, the narrative, and numerical. These sections have different tabs or worksheets within the Excel workbook. The budget section is based on the approved starting budget, and it gives you a way to track your spending against the initial plan. You may request changes to your budget at any time. Just submit it in writing by simply sending us an email and explain the line item change that you would like and the reason for the change, and we'll reply to you in writing with that. The narrative summary is a chance for you to tell us all about how your project is going. We do want you to note that this year we are providing separate narrative boxes for each quarter, so that viewers of your report can see the cumulative year-to-date status updates. The narrative reporting does have a limited number of characters though, so please be concise with your reports. You are welcome to attach additional materials as separate documents in the email to us if you'd like, and we'll add it to your report for that specific quarter. With your help, we have selected 3 to 5 numerical measures with annual targets for your reporting. You will report on these measures each quarter, but it's important to only report new data for each quarter. So for example, if the measure is number of hours of training completed, and you completed 20 hours in the first quarter and 30 hours in the second quarter, you would enter it on the report as 20 in the Q1 column and 30 in the Q2 column, instead of putting 50 in the Q2 column on that report. The form's going to automatically calculate the overall total in the very last column for you. We also want you to note that the reports are published on the public website for review by the funding committees and community stakeholders. And I know that you've heard me say a lot about a lot of information on here, but we hope that you do hear out of all of this is through any of this. If you have any questions or need to change anything, just reach out to us by email and we will help you in any way we can. Now I'm going to pass it to Rachel, who's going to talk to you about contract monitoring.
Thank you, Angela. So we want to spend a little bit of time during this orientation or kickoff call talking about contract monitoring. This comes a little bit later once everyone is already off and running with your projects, but having everyone together on the call today gave us a good opportunity to set the stage for this information. So contract monitoring, for what it means to us, is a set of activities that we undertake related to ensuring that the government grant funding is being put to use in the way that the contract calls for. So making progress toward the project goals and specifically spending the funds properly and accounting for the funds properly. Staff conduct basic contract monitoring for all contracts every year. One of the ways that we do that is carefully reviewing your quarterly reports and following up with you as questions arise. Sometimes those follow-ups generate really helpful conversations, like we might notice your progress toward a certain goal isn't where you expected it to be, and we revisit because of some changes that have come up over the course of the year. Or we might notice spending isn't going as originally planned, and it might lead to a conversation about adjusting funds between line items. So we do carefully monitor all of the contracts through those reports. And then we also conduct a more in-depth type of monitoring for some contracts known as desk reviews. Not all organizations get a desk review every year. In fact, most don't. We select the projects to conduct this more in-depth review on a random sample basis. We also can do these as needed if issues or complaints come up about a project, but typically we randomly select a handful to spot check and work with on a deeper level. So if selected, the way that it works is you would hear from us. We would let you know that we're going to set up an interview, and then staff meets with your organization and asks questions relating to the contract, both on the program side and on the finance side. And then we gather a list of follow-up documents to verify the information that you shared with us, again, both programmatic and financial. The purpose of the contract monitoring is a public funds, a government accountability purpose. And for us in our office, it gives us an opportunity to work with you more closely and connect you with opportunities to strengthen your organizational practices where needed. So we are committed to being a supportive partner on the topic of capacity building. A lot of your organizations built-in capacity building activities into your budget that you submitted as part of the application process. And if needs arise for additional support throughout the year, we do allow grant funds to be used for capacity building purposes, and we also work to identify additional funding sources and provide in-kind support where we can. So I will switch to the next slide, which talks about common findings. This gives a little bit more tangible examples of the kinds of things that sometimes come up. One of them is a common finding related to how funds are being tracked, not having a method of linking expenses to the grant. So your funding contract in the payment section requires that your organization follow appropriate bookkeeping and accounting practices, including what's known as fund accounting. And this means that your organization essentially needs to have a method for separating out Buncombe County grant funds from other grant funds that your organization receives and spends. Grants like this one are considered funding for a specific purpose, which is restricted. It creates restrictions on the use of the funds. And so using fund accounting allows your organization to demonstrate that the specific ways that you spent the funds tie back to the grant and can be associated with these public dollars. Missing receipts is another item we wanted to bring up. We do not ask organizations to turn in receipts or other backup financial documentation when you do your reports or your drawdowns. You are required to keep them on hand, however. Your tracking systems for how you store receipts or invoices or purchase orders, that type of backup documentation, it can be electronic. It can be even paper records. We don't have a requirement about how you save receipts, but you do need to be able to provide them when asked, if asked. And it should be clearly evident that the expense fits with the budget. So that might be as simple as handwriting a note on the top of a hard copy receipt that says, meeting supplies, so that when anyone from our organization or your auditors or anyone looking at the receipt later can clearly see how the funds were used. Organizational policies is another topic that comes up with some frequency. And we don't have a list of specific required policies and procedures for county funding. It really varies by project in terms of what we're going to recommend. So many organizations are still in their growth and development phase, or maybe their policies and procedures need an update. An example, purchasing or procurement policy. If you're spending these funds with outside vendors, having a written policy for how those suppliers or vendors get selected is a practice that we like to see. If your project is making a lot of purchases on credit cards, having a credit card policy is something that we would like to see, which minimizes the risk of misuse. It would talk about who is eligible to get one, how it's stored, all the various kind of rules and regs on how your group handles, whether they can be shared, all of that good stuff. Time and effort tracking is the fourth example that we put here. If your grant is funding staff costs, salaries or benefits, as many of yours are, there should be a system that you have in place at your agency to track employee time and effort, as well as the associated expenses. So like timesheets and payroll. It's important to keep those detailed time and effort records, especially when staff are funded by multiple funding sources. If an employee contributes less than 100% of their time to this grant source, the portion of the grant paid salary should reflect the portion of the time that they contribute. So having a method for tracking that is important, and it should be consistently followed, and you should have internal processes in place to make sure it's consistent and accurate, like having the sign off. It could be a sign off on paper by a supervisor on a hand timesheet. It could be, we had a grantee talking with us about a time card punch clock that they've gotten to track for their project. It could be, another group told us about an app that employees use on their cell phones to enter their time. Again, it's not about how you get there, but just that the organization, if you're spending money on staff, has good practices around tracking that. Again, all of this helps us to be able to give confidence to the public, to the review committee, to the Board of Commissioners, anyone who is wondering how these funds are being put to use. The reporting that you do about impact and finances, and then the monitoring that we do helps provide those assurances. There are a lot of resources and support out there for organizations wanting to build capacity. In our region, if you're not familiar with them yet, you definitely should consider searching them up. We are fortunate to have WNC Nonprofit Pathways. They offer skill building and technical assistance. They also have something that I use quite a bit, which is a consultant directory, linking to professionals with various types of expertise, whether you're looking for somebody to help with financial management, HR, or human resources items, board governance, program evaluation, working on, like Angeline was saying, with getting an unduplicated count across programs. They have consultants that can help with all of those topics available through their directory. And then another great resource in our state is the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. They offer professional development and resources and events, all focused on strengthening the nonprofit sector. They are a membership organization, but you don't have to be a member to access many of their services. If you are a member, they have additional benefits like a pro bono technical assistance program. So back to the topic at hand, which is getting the contracts, what we refer to as fully executed, which means signed by everyone. I want to make a note that we're in great shape, but it might take time. Maybe you want to run the contract through your board of directors, through an attorney. Maybe the person who has the authority to sign it is on vacation. It's okay if we sign these contracts in July. The contract effective date is July 1st. That means you can get going on your project and have staff working, start spending. Anything during that July 1st date forward can be claimed as a use of the funds when you're doing your reimbursement or your financial reporting. So in order to get there, Angela and I think has sent them all out. Maybe there are a couple we're still working on. When you get your draft contract, please reply if you want to talk about any of the content or ask for any edits. There are some areas we can be flexible on. There are some areas that are harder to be flexible on because of the nature of government kind of rules and regulations, but let's have a conversation if you're not sure or if you're not comfortable with the contract. Once you are good with it, return it to us, signed and notarized. Angelin's a notary and can meet folks for a signature if that helps. You'll also need to send back those additional pieces of documentation that we've asked for, the financial assurances, which include your 990 and your financial statements and your certificate of insurance. Again, if you have a question about any of those items, maybe your audit is not yet complete, and we can look at a previous year, or you want to have a conversation about the level of audit that your organization is getting, or the amount of insurance that's requested if you don't have that amount of coverage. But we will need to get those on file in order to get going on the project. So that's the short list of next steps. Here's our contact information. You heard Angelin say earlier, and I will reiterate, please never hesitate to reach out. We aim to be accessible and responsive and walk alongside you as you get going on your projects. So with that, I'm going to stop the screen share and check the chat. No questions in the chat. Did any questions come to anyone's mind? Anyone like to ask a question? Yes, Zuri.
Thank you, Rachel, for this information. So my question is about the signed and notarized contract. So our CEO did that and scanned it back to me, and I was going to scan it to you. So the question is, can we do that and then mail the original?
Great question. We don't need the hard copy. Scanned and emailed is perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
We do want the whole document. Sometimes organizations want to just like send the signature page. It's better for us to get the whole thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Angelin, would you restate the 3 levels of financial reporting? I can screen share and go back to it while you do that. It's a question that came from Corey and Katie.
Yeah, I think, did you say you were going to pull it back up? I can be talking through it. So, if an organization has revenues less than 100,000, it's a compilation.
Yep.
If it's between 100 and 300,000, it's a review, and revenues over 300,000, it would require an audit. But again, if that creates an issue for your organization, just reach out to us and we'll see if we can do a waiver to use one of the other levels if needed.
An example of where a waiver is a no-brainer as a group that's new to working and receiving funding, working with and receiving funding from the county. Audits are by nature historical. They're for things that already happened. So you can't go back in time and know what you're going to be needed. We did try to put this in our grant guidelines so organizations would be aware at the time of application of what you were getting into. But that's a great example. Or, you know, sometimes an organization might say their board of directors has chosen to get audits every other year rather than every year as a way to get through as a financial decision. So let us know what your situation is if you don't have the required level, and we'll go from there. There's a question from Heatherly. I'll read this out loud. Can you review how we will know how much insurance coverage and what types to purchase? And does the county need to be listed? Angeline, will you take that one?
Yes. So when you look at your draft contract, there is an insurance section that should list out the insurances that have been identified and the amounts. And then the county does have to be listed as an additional insured for the general liability insurance.
As somebody who doesn't work in insurance for a living, I learned that being listed as an additional insured is a really straightforward thing that insurance companies do. Issuing these certificates and adding additional insured should be something that is probably really quick and free for you to get. Sometimes there's a delay, and if that's the case, let us know. And if there's a cost, again, that is something that can be included in your administrative or other sections in your budget. So let us know, but that is something that's required. We do have somebody who does this full time at the county in the compliance and risk office. So we follow their lead on what they recommend. And it's a starting place, and it is one of those areas that can be up for discussion. So it's what we would consider out of the box levels. But if you're not insured at that level and your organization doesn't think that's makes the most sense, let's talk about it. Maybe it's a pretty small grant and it's not, it doesn't feel worth it to pay what the cost of that insurance is, or maybe it's a really kind of low risk, the risk of something going wrong based on the kind of activities that are occurring doesn't feel worth those coverage levels. Whatever the case may be, just reach out and let us know. I think we got to the questions in the chat. Would anyone else like to chime in? We covered a lot of different kinds of information, and depending on the size of your organization, you may or may not be the person that deals with those various pieces. And so if you are thinking about today's information and you want to talk with your board treasurer or somebody that does accounting or bookkeeping for your agency, or who does buys the insurance or fills out grant reports or whatever the pieces are, please share this information with them, and also share our contact information, which is in the slides, and encourage them if they need clarification on any of it, to please reach out. I always love having Zoom calls where the Humane Society has representatives, because we have our pet friends on the call with us. I see you, Kim. So great to see everyone today. and connect with you. I know this was a lot of kind of one direction information sharing. It helps us to make sure that everybody gets the same message and starts off in the same way. As we map out the year and work with our grant review committee, they are excited to invite each of your organizations for site visits. We did those virtually, I think, or maybe it was a blend. Maybe this is a year that there can be more actual in-person visiting of programs. Those are not compliance related. Those are about our grant committee really getting to learn more about your work and connect with you and build relationships. In the past, the committee has also done showcases where the different grantees come together and share about their work. So as they map out their plans for fiscal year 23, we will keep you posted. In the meantime, we will be here helping you manage all the little paperwork pieces necessary to get those contracts signed and get your projects launched. So thank you for spending time with us today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.